Hey guys, Slink here with another tutorial, and lately I've been thinking a lot about stereo width. You know, how are these guys getting these super wide sounds that just sound like they're coming from all directions, that they're encasing your whole head in rich sounds. And there's a lot of tools out there that claim to do like the stereo wideners or stereo enhancers and blah blah blah. And I just thought there's got to be like a really simple way to do this. So let's take a look. So just to start off here, I've just got an operator playing a saw wave. Nothing fancy going on in here, it's just a saw wave, no filters or anything, and I just want to record some of that. So you can see that although it sounds like a mono sound, it's actually a stereo sound because we've got this top line here, which is the left signal, and the bottom line, which is the right signal. And these two signals are identical, which means that it is a stereo sound, and these two channels can be manipulated independently of one another. And that's kind of the key to creating a stereo effect, or taking a mono sounding sound and stereoizing it. And the most famous popular way to stereoize something is using something called the Haas effect. And on Wikipedia, they also call it the precedence effect. And it says, the precedent effect, or law of the first wavefront, is a binaural psychoacoustic effect. When a sound is followed by another sound separated by a sufficiently short time delay below the listener's echo threshold, listeners perceive a single fused auditory image. So basically what that means is if the delay between one sound and another sound is short enough, so short that the listener can't determine whether there's two sounds or one sound, it's just going to sound like one sound. And it's also going to give you this binaural psychoacoustic effect, which is, you know, aka stereo. So how do we achieve that in Ableton? Well, it's really easy. With a simple delay, we can delay the left signal and the right signal independently. So we'll turn sync off, we'll turn the wet all the way up, and we'll set the left channel to 1. And the right channel needs to be sufficiently short and below the listener's echo threshold. So for me, you know, it's something below 30 milliseconds. Depending on your delay, it definitely sounds a lot different. So let's just see what that sounds like. The shorter the sound, you can definitely like hear that delay, and you can hear that there's two sounds. But when we get really low with this, you know, say 7 milliseconds, it's definitely fused together. You know, it's a single fused auditory image, exactly as described here. So the Haas effect sounds pretty cool, but I feel like sometimes it sounds a little too wide. It's almost like there's nothing in the center anymore and everything's moved to the edges. You know, take it or leave it, but there's definitely some other ways to create stereo width. Let's try this. We'll put an operator in a group and then we'll duplicate this chain. So now we have two operators, and we're going to set one all the way to the left and the other one all the way panned to the right. And on this chain, we're just going to change the fine tuning a little bit. Let's hear what that sounds like. So there's definitely some stereo action happening there, but you can hear it kind of phasing together. And that may or may not be desirable, so just keep that in mind. But that's essentially what they would call unison, where you have two voices playing the same note at exactly the same time, but each instance of that voice is slightly detuned. Chorus is another way to introduce stereo width, and this kind of combines the Haas effect with the effect we were talking about previously, where we had two instances of operator, the unison effect. Basically, the chorus adds a second voice and slightly detunes it using an LFO. And then there's also a couple of delays here, and it sounds like this. So this LFO is modulating the pitch of one of the voices, and that's coming in and out of phase with the original signal. So you can turn the amount up and then the rate at which the LFO oscillates, and you can also times that rate by 20. Which is pretty insane. But the interesting part about the chorus is the polarity. Speaking of polarity, what is polarity? Well, we can actually change the polarity of our sound using a utility. So let's just check really quick here. These switches give control over the phase of each channel if engaged the signal of the selected channel is inverted. And that's really interesting. Let's just try and get a visualization of that. So I've got these switches off right now. Now I'm going to phase invert both of these. And you can see the waveform starts kind of at the top and then slopes downwards. It's a saw wave. But with the polarity inverted, you can see the opposite is happening. It starts at the bottom and goes all the way up to the top. So the waveform is actually flipped upside down. It's like a mirror image. So it's really interesting when you only phase invert one channel of the stereo signal. So let's try only phase inverting the left channel. You can definitely tell that sounds a lot weirder than before. It looks kind of cool too. You can see this one is normal, top to bottom, but this one's inverted. So the left channel is inverted, which is what we selected there. So this begs the question, as with the unison effect that we tried earlier, what if we combine this polarity inversion effect with the Haas effect? So we can put this in a group, and let's just only select the left channel on this utility, and we'll set this chain to left. And we can just call this left, actually, just to keep it clean. We'll create a new channel here. We'll call this right. Push this all the way to the right. We'll add a utility, set this to right. That's just to make sure that we're only selecting the right channel and not both channels and pushing them to the right. And then we'll introduce a simple delay after this. And we're just going to link these, turn sync off, and we'll set it to 7 milliseconds, which is well below my echo threshold. Turn the wet all the way up. What does that sound like? Pretty crazy. And you can see not only is the polarity inverted, but there's also a delay happening between the two waveforms here. And it's a pretty nice stereo effect. So what other plugins kind of create a delay or have like a stereo effect to them? I think a reverb definitely ticks those boxes. So let's just turn off some stuff here so we get like a through signal. We'll turn the pre-delay all the way down, and we're going to crank these two here. Set the dry weight to 50. Let's crank this as well. Then we'll just turn the decay time down. See what happens. And the early reflections really give it some chorus type effect. And modulating this in conjunction with the size definitely has an interesting effect. Let's try to turn the decay time all the way down. Yeah, you definitely need like a bit more of a decay time here. Although with the size all the way down and the decay time all the way down, there's still some stereo action happening. Without the early reflections, you kind of get like a metallic sound. Or like some kind of harmonic. So it's not ideal for stereo width, but it has a cool effect nonetheless. So we've experimented with the Haas effect. We've messed around with a chorus and a reverb. We learnt a little bit about polarity inversion, but I want to know how the professionals do stereo width. So I'm on the iZotope website, and they actually have a free download plugin here called Ozone Imager. And it looks really simple, and it is really simple. It's got this cool vector scope for visualization of the stereo field. And just with the stereo effect turned off and the width set to 0, basically it's not doing anything right now. Let's just get our head around how this vector scope works. So you can see with no stereo action, the line just goes straight down the center. And I'll try panning it here. So this line is all the way to the left, and that line's all the way to the right. Let's phase invert the left signal. So you can see the line just hits that baseline of the vector scope right there. So that kind of gives you an idea of how this vector scope works. But how does it sound? Let's turn it on. Let's set the amount to 7, and we'll slowly turn the width up and just keep an eye on the vector scope here. So that sounds really cool. Definitely sounds really cool. And I love how you can choose if you want it to be super wide or halfway between. And it sounds great. You know, they definitely know what they're doing. But, you know, it got me thinking, they're giving this plugin away for free. How hard can it be to recreate this with Ableton plugins only? And after many hours of experimentation, I believe I've recreated this entire plugin in Ableton. So I'm just going to leave this up here. It's disabled, totally disabled right now, but we'll be able to see the vector scope as we're working here. So basically to recreate this plugin, we're going to use a polarity inversion and combine that with a Haas effect, but in a slightly different way. So we'll just create a new rack here, and we'll call this channel left. We'll create a new chain, call this right, and another chain, and call that dry. So on the left channel, we're actually just going to select the left signal and we're not going to phase invert anything. On the right channel, we're going to select stereo, so both channels, and we're going to phase invert the left. See what that sounds like. So we've got something janky happening here. Let me turn this dry signal off. So we've got a hard right signal because the left channel is phase inverting with this chain here. So the combination of those two are canceling each other out, and all that we're left with is the right channel. But introducing the Haas effect again, let's link these, set this to 7, turn up the wet. And suddenly we have something that looks very similar to what we had before. So disabling this whole rack, turning stereo eyes on. It's just flipped, right? We can actually flip ours if we just change this to that. We're getting the exact same result. It's a very simple plugin. So now all we need is 2 macro knobs, one for width and one for amount. And that's really simple to set up as well. We'll just name them to start off with. Width, amount. And essentially the amount is the amount of delay that we're adding on here. So what's the maximum? 20, and the minimum is 1. That's perfect. So we can just automate this. We'll set the ranges over here. 20 is the max. The width is a little bit trickier to figure out, and that's why I put this dry channel in here. So what we're going to do is just drag this all the way up, and then these 2 channels are just going to be 1 click away from the very end. So you can probably see where I'm going with this. I'm going to be automating the chain selector, just like this. You can actually automate this chain selector. So now all the way to the right will be dry, and all the way to the left will be wide. We'll flip that so that it kind of makes more sense. Just like that. We can go dry, wet, just like that. Set this to 7 again. And that's all there is to it. So we can rename this our Haas polarity widener and save that in our user library over here. Yeah, it just kind of blew my mind that that's all that's happening in this entire plugin. I know it does look simple, but it's just a simple Haas polarity widener. You know, this is the free version. What about this version with several different bands, you know? You can change the width of each band. This is the same thing, just copied 4 times and put into a frequency splitter. So now that we've successfully recreated a professional iZotope plugin in Ableton using only Ableton stock plugins, yes, I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you, thank you. I think it's time we get a little bit creative with it, you know? We don't have to just stick with the Haas effect, but we can keep this concept of the polarity inversion going. Let's use what we learned earlier in our experimentation and just see if we can do something a little different. And I was thinking, you know, this seems to be the main sort of stereo modifier, if you will, and I want to swap it out with something else. Let's try the reverb here. I'm going to put it before the utility so that the phase inversion happens after. We'll turn this delay off for right now. And let's just set this up, turn the wet up. Let's crank all these boys. So the delay down here. Does that sound familiar? It kind of reminds me of the old school effect on Massive, Dimension Expander. So I'm just playing a saw wave in Massive. And I was also looking around online, and it seems that Exfa released a free little plugin called Dimension Expander. Look at this little guy. This Vectorscope looks so cool with this plugin. I'm not sure if we can recreate that. But nonetheless, I think it sounds pretty cool. I also wanted to try moving this reverb over to here. Yeah, that has a different effect again. Turn the cymbal delay back on. Oh wow, that's really interesting. squiggly line stereoizer. Let's try moving that back again. Yeah, that kind of has a more centered feel to it, doesn't it? I guess you get different squiggly lines depending on what size you use. And you can see nothing's really on the outside of these two lines here, which means nothing is really phasing each other out. So that definitely sounds pretty good. I just want to try to turn the width up here. Oh, that's interesting. So thinking about the unison effect where we detuned one of the voices, let's maybe try a frequency shifter. So just with it in, it's kind of messing with the sound a little bit. We'll tweak some of these settings here. That looks pretty cool. I'm making love hearts in the Vectorscape. Let's try the ring mode. Wow, that's really weird. Maybe we can try enabling the LFO. That's really neat. Let's try the overdrive here. Turn the drive all the way up. Turn everything all the way up. So this is becoming less like a stereo width tool and more like a creative tool. Let's take it a step further and go with a saturator. And I think Sinafold will work really well. I gotta say, this is pretty fun. What else can we try? Maybe the pedal? Not bad for like a subtle sort of distortion on the stereo effect there. What else really messes with the sound? Not sure what a vocoder will do. Let's try that out. Let's go with the modular. So it's sending its own signal into itself. That's really interesting. All right, let's try a flanger. I knew this would be ridiculous. I'm not sure how useful that effect would be, but it's kind of cool just looking at the Vectorscape. I think even an auto filter might have a cool effect. Because it's almost like you're filtering the sides only. Pretty cool. So there you go, a bunch of really interesting ways to create some stereo width to your sound. Really just try anything and everything with this Haas Polarity Widener preset we made, and I might include a download link in the description to download that rack. I don't usually do that, because I just explained how to make it. I kind of want you guys to make it yourself to get the hang of things and figure out how it all works. But I know a bunch of people are going to ask me, oh, can I get the download for it? So yes, I'll put the download up for you. But you have to promise me that you'll get creative and actually try to manipulate it, change it a little bit, mess with the reverb, mess with distortion effects, whatever it might be. Don't just try it on saw waves, try it on vocals, try it on drums, try Haas Polarity Widener on all the things. Cool, so thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you learned something today. Peace.
I'm always on the internet. Turtles.